This video was brought to you by the lovely members of my Patreon.
And I know that Nikkie was trying to sort of present herself the way she presented herself so that you could take her for the makeup artist that she is, right? So that you could take her for the girl who does makeup, not the trans girl who does makeup. Hey guys, it's Kat and it's time for yet another episode of True Tea. Hey guys, I'm so happy to see you this week. Thank you for joining me here, especially those of you guys who come here every single week, every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I really appreciate those of you guys who have committed to contributing to this community, to being here, to adding your voice. I really, really, really appreciate that from the very bottom of my heart, especially those of you guys who are my Patreon members who do get access to these videos way before everyone else. You guys are amazing. If you're brand new to this YouTube channel, what we like to do here is learn, share, and grow through education and conversation. This is the conversation segment. This is where we come and we just sort of openly share our thoughts about things. They're not perfect. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, but either way, the point of this is that they're honest, right? It is our true tea in whatever form it may be. So if you're interested in becoming part of a community that is thoughtful, that likes to have conversations like this, that are all about sort of learning, sharing, and growing together, I would highly suggest that you subscribe to this YouTube channel. We upload these videos every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we would love to have you. Anyway, we are having a conversation about Nikkie Tutorials, but before we do, I would highly suggest you run to your kitchen and grab yourself something to drink. Now, personally, I'm not drinking tea or wine this week. I'm actually just drinking some almond milk. I'm late on my way to a party. I'm going to a Burning Man, a screening of Cats, right? That's hosted by a bunch of people from the Burning Man community. So you can only imagine what kind of experience that's gonna be. I don't really know what to expect, but I know that it's gonna be fun, and I know that I don't think I would have wanted to watch that movie any other way, right? Anyway, enough preamble. Let me sip this almond milk and let's get into this video. So I wanted to talk to you guys about Nikkie Tutorials and share my thoughts about her. And, you know, to be honest, I'm going to just start this conversation out by saying that I'm a little frustrated with her because all of the thoughts that I have to share about Nikkie Tutorials really do feed into some of the stuff that we've been talking about on this YouTube channel. And so I just have a lot of thoughts. And I wanted to share them with you guys and kind of give you guys some perspective. You know, one of the things that we try to do on this channel is sort of recontextualize conversations that are being had about transgender people on social media, because I do think that there are a lot of times where people do sometimes misunderstand some things, and it's easy to get one sort of reading of certain things just based on the way that they're framed. And I really connect with Nikkie's story, so I wanted to sort of share my thoughts on it and kind of, you know, just have conversations really about why Nikkie probably did things the way she did things. So let's get into it. So anyway, if for some reason this is the first video of mine that you are watching, this is the first one you've ever clicked on, I will introduce myself. My name is Kathryn. I am 29 years old. I transitioned when I was 16. I'm a transgender woman. And I have been stealth. I've been stealth. And you know, I've talked about this recently on my channel, but around 2014, I basically kind of gave up my real sort of goal of being stealth, or my goal of remaining stealth rather, because I felt like it was really important for me to come to YouTube and be a known transgender person talking about my experiences, because I feel like there aren't a lot of people like me on this channel. There are a handful of transgender bloggers. I still don't know very many like me, who do work like me, who have been in the spaces that I've been in and continue to be in. So I really do feel this sort of drive to have these conversations. And I can have these conversations because I'm at the stage of life that I am, where I'm no longer really invested in stealth. And I also have so much space between my little insecure young transgender moments to now, where no one can take who I am away from me. I'm strong in my, you know, identity as a trans woman. I hate saying identifies as, I don't like identifies as language. I just am a trans woman, right? And, you know, for me, it just is what it is. So I want to come and share to you guys sort of my slightly more mature perspectives on some of these transgender experiences. And Nikkie's story is one that I connect with immensely. So for those of you guys who don't know, Nikkie Tutorials is a very popular, YouTuber. She does makeup content. She has been very well known as one of, the least controversial makeup YouTubers. She doesn't really get into drama or things like that. She just kind of comes on here, is pretty, and leaves, basically. And a lot of people love her because of just she has a very kind soul, right? Well, she recently uploaded a video where she talked about how she was a trans woman. And for a lot of people, this was really, really, really surprising because a lot of people have only sort of seen her as a cis woman. And she acknowledges in the video that one of the reasons why she's coming out and she's being open about it now is because she was being blackmailed. And honestly, I had so many reactions to the story because first of all, I had no clue that she was a trans woman. I would not have ever have guessed that. That would have never been something that I would have said about her. So it's kind of cool that she came out and that she's being open about it. She talks in the video about how she transitioned so young, and that's probably why she sort of looks the way that she does, right? And it's interesting to me because Nikkie and I have very similar stories in that we transitioned very young, right? And in so many ways, we've been able to live a life where people are not really treating us differently because of that, because we transitioned so young. So there are so many conversations to be had about this because it's so much stuff. It touches so many things. Like I said, I'm mad at her because there are literally so many things tied to this conversation that relate to a lot of the stuff I've been talking about on here. And there's just too much ground to cover. So we're not going to talk about it all. The main sort of common theme along a lot of the sort of reactions that people are having to her is people have described her as deceptive. Deceptive for a couple of reasons. There are some people who are fans of hers who love her and have followed her forever, who feel deceived now that she didn't, come on and talk about being a trans woman almost immediately. There's also the issue of her partner. She has a fiance, she's about to get married, and she talks in the video about how when she first met her partner, he did not know initially that she was transgender. And that is just a minefield of conversations. And again, there's a lot of ground to cover, but the overall sort of theme throughout is deception. So in this video, I wanted to sort of talk about some of the reasons why transgender people try to live how they want to live and maybe why she did what she did, right? And I think this is really important to establish right away is that, first of all, transgender people are very rare, right? There aren't a ton of us that exist, right? But that being said, there's even less of us that want to be known on the internet, right? There's even less of us who want to be seen and be heard and be known. I talk about this in the past couple of videos, but historically, transgender people their goal was to sort of transition to a point where they no longer had to talk about themselves being transgender and they can sort of fade away and live in, a society where they didn't have to talk about their stuff, One of the things I pointed out in my video about transgender acceptance is that the vast majority of people who are transgender do not want every conversation they have to be predicated on their transness, right? And so when you're in that position, right, when you don't want for every conversation that you have to be predicated on your transness, in the current society that we live in, the best way to do that is to pass as much as possible. One of the things that's so interesting to me about this Nikkie Tutorials conversation is I think that for some people, it's revealing to them that there are transgender people that live in this world, that live in this society, right? Who pass, who you wouldn't know, who have, just sort of, there are people who are upset with Nikkie because they, fell in love with her as a blogger, right? They fell in love with her as a blogger and they feel betrayed that she didn't talk to them about this, right? The reality is that there's trans people like this that exist everywhere. I talked about this in the past, but I used to facilitate a bunch of transgender support groups online. And because of that, I know a lot of trans women. One of the girls who I know, she's an elementary school teacher, right? She's a trans woman. She passes, you know, she lives in a sort of situation where if she were out, if she were open, if she were, you know, if she were openly transgender in the way that I am, she would lose her job. Unfortunately, in this world, in the current society that we live in, as much as we like to think that we're so progressive and things are so good and blah, 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 and in many ways they are, it is still very true that there is quite a bit of bias against people who are LGBTQIA+. It might not be as explicit, it might not be as out there in the way that it used to be, but it is there, right? So for a lot of people, there's more incentive for you to hide who you are than there is for you to share who you are, right? For Nikkie, she's been able to have so many opportunities that I'm fairly confident she probably would not have gotten if the people she worked with knew that she was transgender. And that is a weird sort of complicated balance that you have when you're a trans person, right? Like I've said in my previous video about acceptance, we have all these debates about what transgender people should and shouldn't do, who they should and shouldn't be, and you know, who they are and who they aren't. But as we have these debates, life goes on. Life goes on, life pushes forward. And I think most of us, if we had to choose between living a life of destitution or being able to not live a life of destitution and just sort of be yourself and sort of, you know, be taken for how you want to be taken. And I think most people would choose that over a life of destitution, right? So for me, when I look at people who dive into the whole passing thing, who dive into the whole stealth thing, I very much understand where it comes from. You know, I very, very much understand where it comes from. There's a very interesting conversation happening right now about transgender children, about whether or not it's okay for trans people to transition so young. There are a couple of cases where, you know, you've got these trans kids in high school, middle school, etc., and they're transitioning, you know, to what some people say is younger and younger and younger. And there are a lot of people who feel very odd and weird about that, right? Nikkie describes, if I remember correctly, being younger, coming out to her mother, and being able to have access to puberty blockers, which, side note, the vast majority of times when young transgender people do get medical intervention, which usually they don't, but the vast majority of times when they do, they're usually given puberty blockers, which don't really transition you as much as they do withhold or hold back some of the effects of puberty, right? What happens when you stop taking those is that you go through a normal puberty. Puberty blockers allow you to sort of put a pause in your puberty, be able to make a decision and figure out where you want to go. That's what puberty blockers are, right? So she talks about being on puberty blockers, and she also talks about having bottom surgery before she said that she had bottom surgery at 14, right? Which is very young, obviously, right? Now, the interesting thing for me about this sort of rejection, right, of transgender children is you have people who, on one hand, right, when they describe the kind of transgender person that makes them uncomfortable, the kind of transgender person that they don't want to be around, they almost always describe a transgender person who does not look like the cis version of of what is supposed to be their binary gender, right? I often have had on this channel that, you know, it's totally okay for me to use the restroom. I'm a feminine woman who, you know, looks like a cis girl, so therefore it's okay that I can use the restroom. But it's just these non-binary people. It's these, you know, transgender people who don't try, which is so loaded because plenty of people try to pass and never will or can't. You know what I mean? And so there's this weird dichotomy where, on one hand, people who claim to support some transgender people will say, I will support transgender people if they look the way they're supposed to look, right? But on the other hand, will discourage trans people from transitioning young in a way where they could actually go through most of their lives not making other people uncomfortable. You know, one of the things I didn't talk about in my video about pushy transgender people is that a constant fear that a lot of transgender people have in almost every sort of place they walk in life is making people uncomfortable. I think that's I mean, it's not a unique to trans people feeling, but I think it really is a very strong part of a lot of transgender people's experiences. We don't want to make people uncomfortable. And I think that a lot of trans people are very aware that one of the biggest ways you can make people comfortable with you is to pass, you know. A lot of times, I mean, listen, I'm somebody who used to, when I was 16 years old, really younger than that, but, you know, like 14, 15, 16, I identified as gender queer. We don't really use that word as much these days, but I identified as gender queer, right? And I think when you're embodying this sort of neither here nor there androgyny, or when you're sort of being this sort of person who's in between typical gender expression, it becomes very clear that you are disrupting people. You know, you are making people upset by, you're messing with their head by seeing a mixture of gender expression on one person, right? It's very, very clear. So, you know, for a lot of transgender people, right? If we all could choose, you know, the way to go, I'm pretty sure most of us, if we had the opportunity, would choose to transition as young as possible, because not only does it allow us to, you know, have a more, you know, listen, if you transition later in life, you're just waiting for, there's more and more things that you have to do. You know what I mean? Like, there's more surgeries you would get. There's more sort of different types of medications that you would get. There's you don't get to live your life yet. And that's something that I tried to point out in my last video, is that once I managed to change my paperwork, which was the only thing at a certain point in life that sort of made my situation sort of unsteady, once I changed my paperwork, it was like the conversations I was always having were suddenly totally irrelevant. I wasn't talking about being transgender because it just wasn't something that ever came up. Right? And a lot of people, they're part of their transition truly is getting to that point where they're no longer having to, like I said, predicate every conversation they have on them being transgender, right? From that point forward, like I talked about in my previous video, you get to just be yourself, right? When you apply to a job, you're not being dismissed because you're transgender immediately. Now suddenly it's, well, what can you do? Can you actually have the talents to actually work this job? You're suddenly now taken as a person, not as a trans person first, and that's usually as far as people get. Right? So for a lot of transgender people, that is what they're trying to do. That is how they're trying to live. And frankly, I think you can't deny, looking at Nikkie's life, that she's had an incredible amount of success being able to be taken as a woman first and as a trans woman very infrequently in most of the spaces that she's in, right? What I want to also say in this video is that Nikkie did the things that she did did things the way she did because she wanted to be known as a girl who did makeup. That is who she wanted to be known as, right? Compare her online presence to Nikita Dragon, for example. Nikita Dragon almost can't do anything without acknowledging that she's transgender. Nikita Dragon, bless her soul, you know, uses her transness as a selling point in almost every way, right? Nikita Dragon can't just be a beautiful girl who does makeup. She has to be the beautiful trans girl who does makeup, right? I think so many of us want to just be, like I said, taken for who we are, not for the label that you've put on us. That, you know, when people, a lot of times when people know that you're trans, they work from like a series of different scripts that they have in their head, and they try to see which one of those scripts you fit into, right? They're, you know, they don't really want to engage with you. They say, oh, you're transgender. Well, one of my best friends is transgender and she's like this, da 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 da. They can't just engage with you. And I know that Nikkie was trying to sort of present herself the way she presented herself so that you could take her for the makeup artist that she is, right? So that you could take her for the girl who does makeup, not the trans girl who does makeup. Because of course, when a trans girl does makeup, it can't just be because she likes makeup and enjoys doing makeup. It has to be this sort of insidious thing where, you know, of course she loves makeup, of course the power of makeup because she's really a man, and these you know, makeup is all about her hiding her masculinity and da 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 da, blah, blah, blah. Like, they can't just be talented makeup artists. They have to be transgender first, right? And that's something that a lot of us fight against. A lot of us don't want to be taken that way. There's a part of me that is high-key annoyed that I'm talking so much about trans stuff on this channel, because as my long-term subscribers will know, there was like a good year or so where I didn't make any trans content because it just was not relevant to the conversations I felt like having. But obviously I feel passionate about this. That's why we're talking about it. That's why we're here. That's, you know, why you're listening to me. So we're talking about it. But as I feel like I acknowledge in every one of my videos, I do not currently live a life where every one of my interactions, everything I do, every sort of way that I navigate the world is, you know, leading back to me being a trans person, right? I'm transgender. I have no qualms about that, no issues with it, right? But my life is not one anymore where that is a thing that defines me in every space that I'm in. And it is kind of nice to live that way, even though it is very, very privileged, right? It is nice to sort of be taken for yourself and not taken for your preconceived notions of who people think you might be, right? So now the subject of her not telling her partner, right? Now, I'm gonna be very kind of transparent with you guys about this and say that I currently am in two situations right now with men who do not know that I'm trans, who I need to have that conversation with pretty soon. Because, you know, for me, that's always a really complicated thing. Listen, a lot of times when I talk about this, people always think it's so easy to just have that conversation, right? One of the things that Nikkie talked about in her video is that she wanted her partner to know her first, right? Like I said, the goal for most transgender people is not to be known as a transgender person. And sometimes the issue with being out as a trans woman in a dating context, I mean, there's a lot of issues, right? We won't get to like the really, really bad stuff, but one of the issues that I've personally found is that, and because I'm out everywhere online, you know, all my dating websites say that I'm trans immediately. But one of the issues that I've found is that people will connect with you not because of shared interest, not because of, you know, maybe you guys are looking for the same thing. They'll connect with you because you're trans, and suddenly they'll take your transness and transform it into something that is so important. And because they're so new to it, they're not used to being around transgender people, that it's really shocking and exciting and strange and weird, and they just want to experience it, right? And so you get a different kind of person oftentimes when you meet people who are deliberately looking for transgender people. Watch my video about men being attracted to trans women if you want more conversations about that. That's one aspect to it, right? The way that it currently works for me, and honestly, this is something I thought I never would have to do, because I was in my last relationship was a very monogamous relationship where I thought we were gonna get married and have 2.5 kids and the whole da-da-da-da, and didn't pan out. So I thought that I would never have to have this conversation again. Getting back out there into the dating world, some of you guys know that I'm polyamorous. It has been a thing that I'm still figuring out at this age. And I've been dating as a trans person for a while. I thought that I would never have to have that conversation ever again because I was in a relationship and things like that. And now I'm finding myself having to navigate through it. And it is a little complicated. And it's complicated for a couple of reasons, right? So for me, right, like I said, most people when I socialize do not know that I'm transgender. And I kind of like it that way only because they're engaging with me. They're not trying to have a conversation about this trans shit that I frankly don't give a fuck about. They're talking to me, right? They're talking to me. And in the process of talking to me, you know, there might be a guy who is attracted to me. And I think that there's a lot of people who their idea of the way that this should go is the moment a man expresses attraction to me, I should say that I'm transgender. That is what a lot of people think we should do. But for me, here's how it works, right? First of all, there's the question of, am I mutually interested? Am I even interested in this person? Is this a person who I would be even interested in giving my body to? If not, why do I need to tell him about this, these intimate things about my body that he's never going to experience? It's almost unnecessary information if him and I are never going to do a thing, right? So what I will tend to do is I'll meet a guy, maybe there's mutual situation. And in the case of both of these guys that I'm talking about in my personal life, these are two men who are part of my social circles in a way. One of them is part of my Burning Man circle. The other is a part of my polyamorous circle. They're both polyamorous, obviously. And I've seen them about, both of them are two guys that they're actually both guys that have seen me from afar and had a crush on me and recently sort of had asked me out and things like that. So these are people who know me and are around people who know me, right? And so for me, oftentimes when it comes to me telling those types of people who exist in my life in that way, I really do have to sort of think about, is telling this one person worth the possibility of them telling everyone? Now, of course, in my sort of social circle, because there's people that I've dated, there's a spattering of people who know. There are some people who know, there are some people who don't know. It's a mixture of different types of people. Now, I'm a popular, I don't know if you guys have ever heard, but I'm a really popular like YouTuber or whatever. I'm not. But, in the back of my head, I often think, well, I'm out, I'm out, I'm a YouTuber, it's not a secret per se, but it's still it's still a thing that I struggle sometimes to just outright say. But for me, when it comes to when I tell a guy, it's all about A, mutual interest, and B, safety. I have to be safe. If I go to a club and a guy's interested in me, and this happens all the time, I go out, there's a guy that's really interested in me, he's kind of pushy, he's kind of forceful. I've been in so many situations where a guy kind of invades my personal space, is really aggressive and grabs me and touches me and this and this and that. And in those situations, it's such a weird dance, right? Because you could say no, which is what I want to say most of the time, or you worry about what no could mean, right? And you could get hurt. So most of the times when I'm in situations like that, where men kind of force themselves on me, I smile, I nod my head, I, kind of engage with them so that they don't think I hate them or something, but I eventually get myself out of it, But there are some people who think that me engaging with a man in that way is deceptive and misleading, and you tricked him and you did this, when really, it's truly not my fault that someone looked at me and assumed that I was a cis woman. That has really nothing to do with me. Now, I do agree with what Nikki said in the video, because she ultimately says that you have to tell these guys. It's a lot harder than it sounds, but you have to tell these guys, and I 100% agree, right? But the way you do that is, it's complicated. And truth be told, there's been times where I've told guys and they've been upset, they've been pissed, right? There's been times where I've told guys, we're like, okay, well, I'll think about it or I'll process it. And I will say that there are people in my life currently who I came out to them. They now know. Initially, they weren't quite interested. And with time, especially in the sort of circles that I run in where I'm polyamorous, it's blah, 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 they've seen other men pursue me and things like that. And for some men, that allows them to be more comfortable with actually pursuing me as well. But again, I don't live in the world most people live in, so maybe that's not a great example. But long story short of what I'm saying is that this is not always a cut and dry, easy sort of thing. And when it comes to coming out, being safe is the most important, the utmost important thing that you have to be aware of. You have to make sure that you're safe. But as a transgender, this is a whole other conversation, but as a transgender person, you are very aware of the fact, so as a trans woman specifically, you're very aware of the fact that I can't just exist in public space without a man flirting with me, and then because of that, I have to worry about what it looks like for that man to flirt with me. A lot of people's fear, we have people who've been killed for these reasons, is hitting on a person very, very loudly in front of a lot of people. That person turns out to be transgender, and now suddenly he's being laughed at. And sometimes the reaction to that is to hurt someone, right? There's so many scenarios. So sometimes it's safer just to not say anything, right? But it is perfectly, for me, I think it is a really good idea to tell people, and I tend to, right? So I feel like that's a lot of what I had to say about Nikkie Tutorials. Obviously, there are a million different videos that we can do based on this one particular conversation. What I want from you guys is if there's something that I talked about in this video that you would really, really want for me to expand on, I would absolutely love to do that for you. So if you're interested in that, let me know what topic you would want me to do further in another video, because there's just so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about. There's just so many layers of experiences and things. I relate so much to her and just sort of the way that she's lived her life and things like that. We are very similar in that way, even though I am shorter. I will say. Not that that means anything. I'm just saying, you know, I always get excited when I'm not the tallest girl in the room. So, you know, anyway, I would love to see her, run into her and talk to her now that I know that she's one of the girls, you know, love her to bits. I decided to officially stand forever. That is the position that I have formally. So anyway, on that note, I would love to hear what you guys have to say about this. I would really, really love to hear what your reactions were to it. What did you think it was going to be when you clicked on that video? Because I would not have guessed her coming out as a transgender person. That would not have been it at all, you know? So yeah. Anyway, if you guys have made it through this entire video, I would love it if you put this emoji in the comment box below, on top of your comment or in place of the comment. Sometimes people don't have anything to say and they don't know, you know, they just want to, you know, do it for the algorithm, dab or whatever. So if you're into that sort of thing, put this comment. And apparently when you're on desktop, people kept saying this, I've not actually done this, but apparently if you're on desktop and you can't access emojis, if you press the plus sign, if you hold down the plus and the Windows key, apparently that pulls up emojis apparently. And also last week I told you guys, if you really want to, you can just copy the emojis, just like select them. It won't seem selected, but copy and paste and they'll be right there. So yeah. Anyway, on that note, I will see you guys next week. Right now you are looking at 2 videos you can watch if you'd like to continue to sip true tea right here on this channel. We do this every single week at Tuesday, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we would love to have you. Also in the corner, there are several ways you can send me a tip if that is something that you would like to do. I love tips. And speaking of receiving, if you'd like to give me your package, or I mean, send me a package, there's also the P.O. box down there, and I would love to get your package. I would love that a lot. So anyway, I will see you guys next Tuesday. Bye!